Okay, today we're going to learn how to write equations if we're given the graph, and we're only looking at amplitude and vertical translation changes today. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to figure out the vertical translation and the amplitude. I'm going to start by figuring out where the maximums are located. The maximums are at +1, and my minimums are at -5. All right, so then the middle is halfway in between those two. So you can either count or you can find the average of the two. So -5 plus 1 over 2 would be -4 over 2, which is -2. So that's where the new middle is. All right, so that means my vertical translation, the entire graph shifts down 2. And when you write down the vertical translation, make sure you use a word and then a number. So it's either going to be up or down, and then the amount that it shifts up or down. Now, amplitude is the distance from the maximum to the middle or from the minimum to the middle. And we can see that there are 3. The amplitude is going to be 3. Okay. Now, the last thing we want to do is we want to figure out whether this is a sine curve, a negative sine curve, a cosine curve, or a negative cosine curve. Since this one starts here at the y-axis in the middle and then goes up, that makes it a positive sine curve. So on the equation, I'm going to write down sine of x, and then the amplitude was 3, so we're going to put that out in front of the sine of x, and then since it went down 2, we're going to subtract 2. So then the equation is y equals 3 sine x minus 2. Okay. Looking at example 2, all right, so our minimums are at 2, our maximums are at 6, and so that means our middle is at 6 plus 2 divided by 2, because we're taking the average of the maximum in the middle, so that's 8 over 2, which is 4. So our middles are here at 4. And so that means that the entire graph has shifted up to where the new middle is, so it went up 4. Again, the amplitude is the distance between the middle and the maximum, or the middle and the minimum. And so each one of those is 2. So now taking a look at the curve, this is a negative cosine curve, since at the y-axis we're starting at a minimum and then going up and through. So I'm going to put a negative, I'm going to leave a space for the amplitude, and then I'm going to write cosine x. So then because our amplitude was 2, we're going to put a negative between the 2 and the, or a 2 between the negative and the cosine. And then since we went up 4 at the end, we put a plus 4. Looking at problem 3, our maximums are at -1, our minimums are at -3, so that means our middle is at -2. So our vertical translation, we went down since it was negative, and we went down 2. The amplitude is the distance between the maximum in the middle or the minimum in the middle, and so the amplitude is 1. So now looking at this graph, on the y-axis you see it's starting at a maximum. So that means it's a positive cosine. So we have the cosine of x. The amplitude is 1. You can either write the 1 or you can just leave it as cosine x, because when it's multiplication the 1 is implied. And then because it went down 2, you're going to subtract 2. So either of these two answers would be okay. All right, number 4. Our maximums are at 5. Our minimums are at -3. So then if we do 5 plus -3 and divide by 2, taking the average of the maximum and the minimum, that'll give us our middle. So that's going to be 2 over 2, which is 1. So our middles are here at 1. So that means the vertical translation, the whole graph went up 1. So now the amplitude, again, is the distance from the maximum to the middle, or the minimum to the middle, and both of those are 4. And so writing our equation, looking at the y-axis, we see we're starting in the middle and then we're going down. That makes it a negative sine curve. All right, the amplitude was 4. Don't forget the x. And then since the whole graph shifted, the vertical translation was up 1, we put a +1 at the end. One other thing to note is that since the amplitude is a distance, amplitude is positive. Right? So even on this last one, even though we had a negative sine curve, the amplitude was positive. Same thing in problem 2. Even though we had a negative cosine curve, the amplitude was still positive because distances are positive numbers. All right, that's it. So you guys can go ahead and you can try the worksheet in your packet.